Hello everyone, it's me and I'm doing a video about composition and framing. So I wanted to do this video for a while but I haven't really got round to doing that. Um I was supposed to do it last year actually, but the idea never came to mind until like way late last year. And I started creating this presentation like before but I never finished it until last night. And here is the video that I'm presenting to you now. So, what is composition? So, the term composition means putting together. So, this is a kind of arrangement of particular elements which make up a picture, whether it's in photography, whether it's a photo, film clips, music, or any type of art form. Other descriptions include design, form, visual ordering, structure, depending on the context. In graphic design, this is commonly referred to as a page layout. Pictures can tell a story through many different elements, angles, structures, lighting, among other things. This could be about a person, place, or event. So you don't really need to have words or speech just to tell a story. Well, it does. It's more of an action. In films, dialogue's more of an action rather than action, an actual, you know, story plot thing. So pictures speak thousands of words. So a picture could tell you a lot of information, more than words can tell you, basically. Why is it important? Sometimes an image can be well shot, but it does not have a desired effect which one is hoping for. The reason the composition could be off. So composition is everything when it comes to a photograph. So the technical side of an image is easy to learn. So one thing that could separate a great image compared to an image that is less interesting is the composition. So everyone has their own camera which they can use to take pictures of things they like the look of visually. So you don't really need to go out and buy an expensive camera just to take photos. There are you can use your own phone and there are apps that you can use to take stunning photos of different things as well as edit or filter them to make them look a bit more presentable or professional, have a professional like finish, I guess. Elements of composition. Lines. This is used to capture the attention of specific parts of the frames. Lines are the best way to do this. Leading lines is exactly the definition of capturing lines which draw you to the frame towards the subject. So lines don't really need to be straight, as if like the second image there of the man walking towards the camera, but he's looking in a different direction. You don't really need straight lines because we know instantly we are focused on the guy, but and there are curvy lines as well, which can focus at a further distance, and it doesn't have to be a close up of an image of the person or anything because you won't be able to see where the person is or the line there, because we can see the focus is actually the small figure over there. Even though we're following those lines, the figure is actually the focus of the image that has been captured. So leading lines allows you to focus on specific parts of the frame. So your first thing you look at is that thing. So the first thing I looked at was this image there of a person walking. And this is the same here of a man walking with his hands in his pockets. Shape and form. So, shape and form are similar elements of design. The main difference between the two are that things to do with form tend to be 3D, have height, width, and depth. Photography is a representation of a scene that is 3D, whereas a painting has more shapes. So, this image here, I think it's a very famous image, but I'm not sure what it's called or anything like that. So, there's of a pepper, I think it's a bell pepper or something. And this image does have a unique shape, but it's also very, very three dimensional because it has everything that includes a 3D image or shape. So the image has these, it has a lot of depth and it does have width as well, and it has a bit of height, which makes this image so prominent, and the lines of this image look so poignant and visually stunning. So value refers to how light and dark a subject in a photograph is. So this is about shades of black, white and grey. So the beauty of photography is that you can create black and white images to capture something so powerful. Most people like to use black and white images to make it more dramatic, the photo more dramatic. And photographers often look at the vibrant colours, but they overshadow the tones that make up a photograph of a particular image. So the lightest part of this photo is actually the one that we're focusing on, that has been focused on the glass, the vase, where the plant is inside, the stem of the plant as well. That's the lightest part of the photo. The darkest part is the stem, where you go up and you see the shadow, because it does create a dramatic look for the flower, because we can see the flower in the shadow of the flower inside the vase. And the positioning does make it look dramatic as well, because the shadow does go up and it creates this very, very visualizing image. So the space is occupied in the photo through the use of form and shape in order for these elements to come together. This arrangement setup is known as negative space or empty space. This is a interesting compositional element to use. So straight away we see this man, but and he's wearing an orange top and he's wearing a hat. But we see this huge orange wall that he's standing in front of, which is the main space that is being focused here. So it looks like a very stunning photo and a very interesting way show to present a negative space. There is something called positive space, which I think is more to do with surrounding elements. Rather, I think in this it just fills up the space, and the negative space doesn't do that. I think it's more to do with the surrounding, and I think positive space is to do more with the person or the item that's in that space. So this image is actually a very good one to capture negative space because the background is a very nice orange colour. So colour as we are speaking of color before, color is very important in photography to understand and learn what makes a photograph look the way it looks. So it's basically you could study and analyze colors of different photos. So colors consist of three parts: hue, value, intensity. Hue is the color itself, like red, blue, green, etc. Or it could be different shades of blue, white, blue, grey, black, or whatever. And intensity is to do with the saturation, whether the image is bright or pale in terms of colour. And value is the luminosity of colours, which are dark, could be either dark or light. So these citrus fruits in the pink background do complement a lot because there's different hues of that orange basically, which creates very visually a bright image because it has a bit of hue in it because there's different shades of orange because it's to the point where it's light like a yellow color. There's different hues of warm colors in this photo and intensity, is basically how bright this image is. This image is quite a bright image and very light, colourful image. And it just stands out really off the pink. It stands out from the pink background as well. So texture refers to the tactical element of something. In the case of a photograph, there isn't any one tactical feeling. All photos feel the same. As such, the texture refers to the look of how something is perceived in reality. So remember I have mentioned this before about texture because you don't really need to feel the item to know what it feels like to the naked eye. Because it's about the sensory experience, as I mentioned before. And you don't really need, for this image, I can tell how it feels. I feel the rough, textured lines of the tree bark. So you don't really need to go to the item, go outside to the item, to go and feel a tree bark to know that what a tree feels like. You can actually instantly tell through eyes, through looking at it. It's a bit like when I said about the sensory experience because sight you don't really need the actual feel. You don't really need to use that sensation, the one that you normally use for a certain thing to actually get this sensory experience, basically. Because I can use my eyes to feel what my hands. It just sends because your brain picks up on it. That's why I said you don't really need to go outside to go and feel what a tree bark feels like. You can actually see it through your eyes. What the tree bark feels like because your brain picks up on it and then you visualize it and you can feel it. It rushes through your body basically. It sends the signals to your hands to imagine what that thing feels like. So you can imagine it in your mind. So that's what this that's what this image does exactly. So principles of composition. Rhythm creates movement by repeating patterns and shapes throughout the frame of an image in random or in a highly organized arrangement. So this is a very rhythmical image and it's very organized as well. And the patterns of the ground, of the road, the zebra crossing. There's four men crossing a road. It's a very famous image. I think it's the Beatles, and they're crossing on Abbey Road. I've been near Abbey Road before. I think it's around Marylebone area. I'm not sure, but I know I've been around this area. I've heard of this area. I might have been to this area before. I'm not sure, but I know where. I think I heard where it is, but you know. So you can see that this image is very rhythmical because the men are in in and very stream-like. It's all stream-like, the rhythmical imagery of the men walking on the road. So, and there was a theory about Paul McCartney apparently isn't alive because he's barefoot and the other men are wearing shoes. So this can. So I never really believe it's conspiracy theories because I always think they're a load of crap anyway. And this image shows four men walking across the road in a very stream-like manner. And it's about uniformity and organization. And I think those things you need to capture really well for it to happen. For you to get the desired effect you want the image to look. Balance is splitting your photograph, and you can split your photograph into two halves, which helps you to decide whether the two elements of the image are meant to be with each other. So, does this photo, you need to ask yourself this, does this photo have too much going on? Or or is there something that needs to be added in that is not already in the photo? So if it doesn't have so this does not have anything to do with framing, the framing being symmetrical. It's all about attracting the viewer's eye. So this image does exactly that. Mainly it's in the dark background, but what draws you in more is the colour of the cherries that draw you in because of the stem. The colour of the cherries basically is very like a very glossy wine red colour, or burgundy you could say. And it's a very nice image because it's the colours of the cherries stand out compared to the rest of the image because the background's very dark, which doesn't really please you because it's just a normal background. Or it might be film taking place in a studio where these cherries are being the photo of the cherries were taken. And there's a pot as well, but the light only reflects the pot slightly, but not too much. But the cherries are the thing that attracts the eyes. It's the first thing you see, and you feel like you're drawn towards the image. And that is what was happening to me when I visualized this image. So proportion refers to the size of the object within the frame as they relate to one another. So it can be utilized in a successful composition by exaggerating proportions in one way or another by changing the camera angle. So you can actually experiment with filming. In films, we do like to experiment. Some filmmakers do love to experiment. And I like experimenting with films as well, but not too much. But I do like to do that from time to time. So the photographer can also position the subject in such a way to make the differences in proposition the focus of the image. So you don't really need to be so safe. You can experiment and you can make things look more appealing and or more interesting. This is quite a creative image. You kind of see people do this in certain photos. Look, there's some countries, there's a Tower of Pisa one, which looks interesting. I think the person made themselves bigger than the actual building, the actual tower. There are people that stand on the tower and they make these weird photos to exaggerate themselves, to make themselves look huge or maybe tiny or something. You can, like this image, the balloon's actually the focus, not the person's hands, which kind of makes it more interesting for me. Because I'm viewing the image as the balloon is the actual focus of this. Because the hot air balloon is actually very tiny when the person took the photo. Emphasis refers to how the elements of your composition guide the viewer to an intentional subject within the frame. So to do this, the photographer can employ a variety of techniques. Playing with selective lighting helps emphasize the subjects being lit. Other ways to emphasize the subject include leading lines and proposition. Even the way that the photographer dresses or groups subjects can place emphasis within a frame. So this image has the intended focus was the ladybird in the image. So the ladybird, the colours of the ladybird is the focus, and the surrounding things are just there. And I don't think this has leading lines nor proposition to make this image be the center of focus. I think this person intended to focus the image because the ladybird, they just zoomed in and I think they used to just set up their frame. I think it just happened. It's one of those photos, I would say, that just happens for them. But I'm not right. I'm not sure if I'm right. I'm just giving my own opinion. So they didn't really address or group, they didn't really plan this photo to happen. It just happens. It can be possible, to create images that do such a thing. So the color is actually the focus, really, not really about the proposition or the leading lines. I would say it's more to do with the color. So harmony uses color, texture, lines, and other aspects of art to point out the similarities of subjects within the image. So harmonious images will often showcase how different objects are all the same and utilize something that all objects have in common. So this image is in like a forest or jungle or so, but that's actually blurred out the background. But the main focus is these stones that are stacked up and the water. So the image, how does the image relate or fit in with its environment, which is why it's a harmonious image. So the water flowing on the river, the stones on top of the river flowing makes this image look harmonious with its own environment. It's more about the environment. And so let's go into variety now. So variety is the opposite of harmony. Not just, not to say that it's about chaos, but variety juxtaposes different objects together so that their differences is what brings interest to the photograph and the story being told. So all this photo, I found this on Google Images, and it's interests me that it looks more like a pop art effect, makes the colors different colours of windowsills, each one in the same line, in different lines, but they are different in various ways, like colours, colours and shapes and sizes and all those things, old and new. These it complements the image well. These different variety of windowsills and the walls, different colours make an image look interesting. You don't need anything to look similar. And it does look, it's a very opposite. It's nothing to do with the environment. It's more to do with the variety and showcasing all these colourful images. Movement within the composition is the photographer's ability to imply motion. Obviously, nothing within the still image can is actually moving, but by using creative shutter speeds, panning or zooming the camera, you can create an implied feel of motion. Yes, as we all know, she's not. We can't. We know she's not moving, otherwise she would be a GIF. But the sense of movement, we can feel like she's moving. We can feel like we're moving with her. Basically, it's a bit like the sensory thing again for me. Like I can feel like I'm moving whipping my hair inside the water and out. My head lifts up. That's the exact feeling I get from this image. And it did interest me when I picked it. And this is more about my opinion rather than an expert opinion of what. But it does signify the movement. Because I'm trying to apply this to the exact one principle this uses. So you can, I think this person, whoever took this photo, must have zoomed in and they must have set the shutter speed to the intended shutter speed they want this photo to be taken. So they wanted this photo set up for her to move her head, to whip her hair back. That's what this person wanted to do. So Gestalt principles of composition. So Gestalt is more of a theory side of things. So these include similarity. Showcasing how things are similar is a powerful tool within composition. This can be incorporated by grouping things together, whether they have the same shape, form, color, texture, value, or size. The viewer is looking at the sense of unity within an image by putting things together. It helps convey audience's satisfaction. So this image here, I would say that the colors, different shades of blue. So it's more to do with the value of the image as well as the texture. So the image has the same texture as well. And not shapes, but the texture is more like a wool or nice cotton fabric that makes this image stand out. And it has the same patterns as well because these two, the first one and the third one, both have the same pattern. And I think the second one does as well with the fourth image. And it's interesting the backdrop as well that is used in this image to create this sense of similarity here and uniformity as well and all that. So it did please my eyes quite a bit. Continuity composites of how shapes and lines of an image work together to lead from one to the other. The ending of one shape should lead to the next one. The objects of this image have to flow, in the image, have to flow with each other, dependent on how they're positioned. So they need to flow with each other. It does depend on the position, but anywhere in the photo still has to flow with each other. It needs to be in sync, basically. You don't in films we use it for the characters to be in sync, to time and all that stuff. That's why we tell actors, as directors, they tell actors to wear the same clothes or the props to be the same as before if they're going to film the next day, because continuities is quite key to making images be at sync. So this man, they're all laying in a crucifix. There's two people, but the photo is in sync. It's actually there's continuity in this photo. Even though they're in different positions, they are still doing the exact same thing. So diagonally, you can see that the man and the woman are upright. The woman's upright first, but the man's upright second. But the man's downright first and the woman's downright second. So the laying down of those people makes the image look like they are synchronized, but in a more unique fashion, I would say. I know it's quite strange that they're in a crucifix position, but it looked interesting as well. I think it's a very famous image as well, which I searched about before. I think it's called Argentina. I'm not sure what the actual name is, but I think it's called that, Argentina. A closed composition photograph is a sort of image where all the elements are arranged neatly inside the frame. So the elements of the frame that uses closed composition do not draw the viewer's eyes away or make it jump from one subject to another. So the objects are these two pairs, and we exactly do focus on them, but they are close together to create this unique. It's not unique, but it's kind of a still life effect, and you don't really. It doesn't really It does capture the eyes to see those pairs being pictured like this, but the opposite to a closed composition is an open composition, which is where your eyes are all scattered everywhere to see different. So the pairs would have been separate, not together. So proximity. The principle of proximity is about moving things closer or farther apart to achieve a more organized look. The principle says that the related items should be grouped together so that it be viewed as a group rather than several unrelated elements. So I'm guessing this does encompasses proximity, which is why I got this image on the internet, obviously. And the person must have zoomed in my eyes, to get the legs moving. They could have rehearsed. This is like a professional photo shoot type thing. The legs of this person skipping along wall, the sand, the sandy ground, and they must have zoomed in to get that action, because it's more about, it can be about the shutter speed as well that they used for this, to get this desired movement of this image. And I really like this image as well for that reason. And you don't need to be, don't play safe. You have to be experimental. You need to be think outside the box, and this person must have done that very well. But it looks simple, but it's very effective. Figure slash ground. So this is something to do with the relationship between the main subject and everything else that's in the frame. Particularly, these objects may be people, wildlife, or a product. Traditionally, the goal of the photographer is to put these subjects in a place where they clearly become the dominant part of the image and stand out from the background. So the main focus is the girl on her mother's back because she's looking, because we can see her face, but we don't see the mother's face. But the relationship between the subject and the ground looks practically interesting indeed. And people say they may have seen this type of thing before, but the use, the way they did it, makes me think. I don't know how they did it exactly, but I know they decided to use this angle. But photos don't just happen like that. You have to plan them out or get the right shots. They could have zoomed in as well for this desired effect to happen. And it creates the atmosphere of the girl being on her mother's back and where they're walking. It creates the sense of atmosphere and space. And it just makes her stand out more than the other elements of the image. She stands out more than her mother, even though we see the mother in focus, but she's not the main focus. Symmetry. The dictionary states the quality of being made up of exactly similar parts facing each other or around an axis. In photography, symmetry appears when parts of your composition mirror other parts. So it is created when two halves of your scene look the same and balance each other. So they need to be exactly in sync, mirror like basically. Like what happens with these two images. So they're both different colours, but they are very symmetrical. And symmetry is quite difficult to achieve in films. And one director, as we all know, that's able to do this is Wes Anderson. And his unique style of film makes his films. This is why he's so recognizable, is because he uses that effect. He's kind of like one of my favorite directors, I would say, in terms of how he makes his films and that. And I really like some of the films he makes that I've seen, which he managed to achieve the effects regardless of whether it's an animation or a live action. And it's very interesting to have a mirror like image which encompasses the frame itself. So they both look different colors, but they're the same. And symmetry is all about the reflection that has to look exactly like that one, or has to be the same in terms of shape, size, color. It could be color as well, or it could be depth and width and shape or form, whatever. Composition techniques. Rule of thirds, we do talk about this in films as well. The rule of thirds uses key intersection points and breaks the scene up into thirds vertically and horizontally. In the grids, in the grid where these lines intersect are the points of where you should try to put your main subject. Well, this image is broken up to threes. The image doesn't need to be in the center of the camera. It could be the main subject doesn't need to be in the center of the camera. They could be anywhere from they could be in left, right, up, down, so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be a middle. We don't always have to rely on the midpoints. So those lines, the small 4 points are the mid sections, which the lines meet at a perpendicular angle, 90-degree angle. So the dog is the main focus, but everything that encompasses the image makes this image a rule of thirds due to that reason. You can apply it to every image, like almost like a lot of images, you can apply this rule on. Even in films, we use rule of thirds. When you turn on the camera, you do see the grid. Some people don't like that and find it distracting, but it's a very good, useful tool to use when you're filming like different scenes and you want to get that composition right. So you would use a rule of thirds. I think it's useful to have that, even though I didn't really like it to begin with. And I thought maybe I should just leave it. And it was actually useful for certain stuff that I'm films that I made. Framing within a frame. Frame within a frame consists of positioning the subject so it's framed by something else in the scene. You can use anything for this technique to be absorbed. For example, door, a door, or and a window or a mirror. So basically, this is a plane. Someone inside the plane, they must have taken the image inside the plane, and they photographed London, the London Bridge, Tower Bridge, from an upright, from this very aerial view, and it looks quite amazing, really. That you can do it through a window. You can take pictures through a window. And it looks, that's what we call frame within a frame. And this image definitely demonstrates that. Simplicity in photography is essentially equivalent to minimalism, which is basically what it is actually. So, this is a composition technique which concentrates on keeping the absolute necessary information in the frame. You can be fooled by a composition in a photograph which appears to look very simple, but without notice is actually very complex. This image actually demonstrates minimalism, simplicity, because the only focus necessary is I think it's a flower and these pebbles. The flower stands out and the pebbles are in the frame too to make it more like a backdrop, which is what this image intends to do. And all you don't need so many things to make a photo look great. These elements, simplicity is always key for many things really. Not just taking photos or making short films or feature films or whatever. You can, it's mainly for everything. Simplicity is key. Contrast is all about balancing out the two polar opposing elements in a composition. These could include dark, light or dark, bright or pale, hot or cold, and so on. Well, that's certainly something useful to have in your pocket when composing an image. Thinking of other ways that things can contrast and look for those as well. This image does have a lot of dark, shadowy effects, but it's a very bright image as well. because the colours of the hat and the wall stand out. The hat in particular, even though there's a lot of shadows, because it's a very dark imaging, shadows are very good for creating dramatic looks to the image. And it's like film noir type thing, because you can do that, or neo noir, which is the new version of film noir. And this photo actually uses the contrast effect very well in terms of the colour of the image. So warm colours with shadowy effect looks very stunning to me. Repetition of shape, patterns, and repeated shapes are an interesting way of making great photos. The key to be successful in this is to fill the frame. You need to ensure that there are other interesting things at play besides the pattern itself or its colours, shape, or texture. So this image is basically thin yellow stripes and the grounds being made out of grey concrete. But that's not the main thing that stands out. The person in the photo does make the image look more like different, basically. So you don't. It makes it more interesting to have somebody in the image rather than just have this plain background. Which so repetition of shape doesn't need to always be about the actual backdrop that the person's walking on itself. It could it doesn't need to be about the backdrop itself, it could be about the person as well, which makes the image have a more interesting dynamic. Perspective. Perspective in photography is defined as the sense of depth or spatial relationship between objects in a photo, along with their dimensions with respect to what viewer the viewer of the image sees. By changing the perspective, subjects can appear much smaller or larger than normal. Lines can converge differently and so much more. So, this image, it makes you feel like you're actually looking like it's a bit like a POV type image, a POV shot, and that's what a perspective is, the point of view of a person or what the person sees. The perspective is mainly about the viewpoint of somebody or an object or whatever. So it looks like a sky view, a worm's eye view type image, and the skyscrapers look like they are the towering presence in this image, which creates an interesting dynamic and creates an interesting look to this image. It makes you feel very small and low. It's like you're lying down, but you're not. It's like you. It feels like you're lying down. I think this person must have took a lying down position, or maybe like a lean backwards position to take this photo, and it creates an interesting perspective of how the frame, the composition looks. Focus light. Almost anywhere that skies open up gives you a wonderful rays of light. An interesting shot is just waiting to be captured. Focus light automatically gives you a point of view due to the contrast it creates between light and dark areas within the scene. Well, in the past, we had cinema like German Expressionism and film noir, which comes from German Expressionism. I might make a video about that in the future. And French New Wave or French Noir. Basically, this focuses on the woman's face. Film noir is often used. Shadows do create very, very poignant images and very capturing and alluring images as well. Because it makes the image look more dramatic, dark, and has more of a a very nice visual tone to it. Has an interesting look as well. So focusing on the light on a certain subject. So the focus is actually on the woman's face rather than everything else that's going on around her, which makes this image look interesting, more dramatic and very dark and haunting as well. So it creates this relationship between dark and light in this image. Natural framing is a popular technique of landscape photography where the photographer deliberately places the primary subject in a position where accompanying elements surround it, highlight it, or call attention to it. A connection between objects framing the subject and the subject itself should exist. So this image looks interesting. It looks very in this natural environment. So framing the subject the way it should creates this nice natural feel. So this person deliberately photographed this photo. It looks like the Grand Canyon. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but the wood creates this nice, interesting look of the frame. It's quite creative as well to use that natural environment. They didn't really have to do anything tangible. They just felt this image was interesting to use. And the colours itself does create this natural feel to it. And just connects with the environment very well for me. And this is the references that I found, these sources. And I know, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, subscribe to get more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.